I grew up believing that Thanksgiving was supposed to be the safest night of the year, the one evening when even the most broken families pretended to be whole. In suburban Ohio, where everyone knows everyone, and reputations stick harder than winter ice tradition, was not just a ritual, but a performance. My family excelled at performing. That evening, the Carter house glowed with warm lights visible from the street, the kind neighbors slow down to admire. Inside, the air smelled of sage stuffing and sweet potatoes, and the fireplace crackled like something out of a holiday commercial. Anyone walking in would have thought we were the picture of small-town American harmony. They would not have heard the unspoken rules pulsing beneath every smile. Keep the peace. Do not embarrass the family. Do not upset my father. I was 28, but those rules still wrapped around my ribs like wires. This year, I tried to convince myself things would be normal. I told myself I could breathe, eat, get through one evening without tension clawing at my spine. I even wore a soft cream sweater instead of something dark, hoping light colors would make the day feel lighter. For a while, it worked. My Aunt Marianne laughed as she set out the cranberry sauce. My cousins argued about football scores. My mother hummed as she stirred gravy. And my father, Frank Carter, held court at the head of the table, a glass of bourbon already in his hand, though dinner had not started. When he drank before the meal, it was never a good sign. Still, I tried. I forced a smile and carried the roasted turkey from the kitchen island, its weight familiar and grounding. For years, I had been the one to carry the main dish. My mother claimed it was because I had a steady grip, but the truth was simpler. I was the quiet one. The one who did not talk back. The one who would not make a scene. The one easier to blame. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the platter, but I tightened my grip and steadied myself with a deep breath. Eyes followed me as I stepped toward the dining room. My father watched too, though not with pride. His stare was a test. "Bring it to the table. Do not mess this up. Make me look good." The room fell quiet as I entered. Conversations paused, chairs scraped softly as relatives shifted to make room for the centerpiece dish. I felt dozens of eyes on me, the weight of expectation pressing deeper than the turkey in my hands. I took 3 careful steps, then 2 more, and then the platter tilted. I still do not know how it happened. My hand twitched, or the heat stung, or the edge of the rug caught my shoe. The heavy bird slid forward, pulling the platter downward, and in the next breath, the entire turkey crashed onto the floor with a dull, sickening thud. The sound cut through the room like a blade. For one suspended moment, no one moved. No one breathed. The smell of roasted herbs turned sharp in the silent air. My father's face went blank. Not surprised, not confused. Blank in the way a storm cloud looks before it splits open. Behind him, my Uncle Bob stopped mid-step, his expression folding into worry. I opened my mouth to apologize, but nothing came out. My father stood slowly pushing his chair back with a scrape of wood against wood. His jaw tightened, and the veins in his neck rose. I felt heat travel across my skin and settle behind my eyes. He was not just angry. He was humiliated. In Frank Carter's world, humiliation was the worst offense, and it always demanded punishment. "You had one job tonight," he said, his voice low, steady, too controlled. "Look at what you did." I tried to speak again. I tried to tell him it was an accident, that my hands slipped, that I was sorry, but he was already moving. My Uncle Bob stepped forward. "Frank, wait. She just dropped it. It is nothing." But my father did not look at him. He reached behind him and wrapped his hand around the back of his wooden dining chair. For a split second, I thought he was going to move it aside. I thought he might walk past me to cool off in the kitchen, or yell or slam a door like he used to when I was younger. But then he lifted the chair. He lifted it high enough that I saw the underside, the worn wood, the scuff marks where the legs dragged across the floor. Time stretched thin like a thread about to snap. "Emily, move," someone whispered. I could not tell who. My feet would not respond. I stood frozen as the chair came down with a hard crack against the side of my head. A blinding light filled my vision. Something warm trickled near my ear. The floor rushed up. The world tilted on its axis. Voices rose into chaos, but they sounded distant underwater. I heard my mother scream my name. I heard dishes breaking. I heard my aunt whispering, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." Then one voice cut through all of it. Bob shouting for someone to call emergency services. His voice shook with panic. "Call 911 now!" And then, my father's voice roared louder. "No one is calling!" She slipped. "Do you hear me?" She slipped. Everything blurred into a smear of color and noise. My body floated somewhere between the hardwood floor and a dark, rushing void. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness completely was my uncle leaning over me, his face pale and terrified, yelling for help while my father yelled back, his voice cracking with fury, and something else I could not name. Control, fear, shame, or maybe all three. And then nothing. Darkness swallowed the room, the voices, the house, the entire world, and I disappeared into it. The darkness did not release me gently. It tore open in jagged flashes like lightning behind closed eyes, and every flicker came with a new sound I could not place. A voice calling my name, a thud, someone crying, someone arguing. Then sirens faint at first, then growing louder until they seemed to press against my skull. I drifted in and out, aware only that the world was moving around me while I could not move with it. When I finally surfaced enough to hear clearly, the first voice I recognized was my Uncle Bob. He was shouting from somewhere above me, shaky and desperate, and the fear in his tone cut sharper than any pain in my body. "She is not waking up. Hurry! Please hurry!" Footsteps pounded through the house. Doors opened. Someone said, front room," and then another voice, calm and practiced, responded, "We are with her." Hands touched me, firm but careful. Flashlights swept across my vision, and I winced even though my eyes were still barely open. "Emily, can you hear me?" "Emily, if you hear me, try to move your fingers." I tried. Nothing happened. My head felt too heavy to lift my limbs filled with wet sand. The floor beneath me was cold now, and I realized they had cleared space around my body. Someone was kneeling beside me, a paramedic, her voice steady, assessing while she worked. Pulse weak but present, pupils sluggish. "We need to check cranial bleeding." Another paramedic moved behind my head. I felt pressure near my ear, then a warm trickle down my neck. I heard the quiet rustle of gauze. Head trauma. Possible concussion. Laceration approximately 3 centimeters. He adjusted my jaw gently, keeping my neck aligned. Did she fall forward or backward? Before I could form any thought, my father answered for me. "Backward!" She tripped over the rug carrying the turkey. "She is always clumsy." His tone was clipped, irritated, as if he were describing a broken dish instead of his unconscious daughter. The paramedics did not respond to him immediately. They continued examining me, working as a unit. I felt the collar slide around my neck, locking my head in place. Then straps tightening across my chest. A familiar voice cut through the tension. It was my mother somewhere behind the paramedics, breathless and trembling. "She just slipped. That is all. She is fine. She will be fine." The female paramedic near my shoulder lifted her head. "Ma'am, please step back. We need space." Someone tugged her away. I heard soft crying. Then more footsteps. Aunt Marianne whispering, "Oh, dear God," and someone else muttering, "This is bad." Through the haze, I tried to understand the movements around me, but everything blurred together. Only one thing sounded clear. A male paramedic said the injuries do not match a simple fall. The room froze. Or maybe my fading consciousness made it feel that way, but I felt the air shift. My father snapped his response so quickly it cut the silence in half. "Are you calling me a liar?" The paramedic did not raise his voice. "Sir, I am saying we need an accurate description of the mechanism of injury. Her wound is on the side of her head. That is consistent with lateral impact, not a backward fall." I felt pressure around my ribs as they secured another strap. My breathing hitched, and the paramedic immediately adjusted his position. "Easy, Emily. You are doing fine. Stay with me if you can." My father stepped closer. "Enough." She slipped. "That is all you need to know." His voice carried an authority he used with everyone, even strangers. But paramedics in Ohio do not take orders from angry fathers. The female paramedic spoke again, firmer now. "Sir, Step back. If you interfere, we will request police on scene." Those words hit the room like another blow. My father hesitated. Then I heard Uncle Bob's voice crack open for the first time. For a man who spent his life avoiding confrontation, his tone now was shredded and raw. "Frank, stop. She was hurt. We need to let them help her." My father's reply came through clenched teeth. "You did not see what happened. You will keep quiet like everyone else." But his voice wavered and the paramedics heard it. They exchanged looks. They had heard enough narratives to know when something was wrong. They resumed work, speaking in clipped professional phrases. "Glasgow coma scale 10. We need to transport. Get the gurney in position." The backboard lifted beneath me. My body moved in one controlled piece, floating up. I moaned without meaning to the pain radiating in hot waves from my skull to my jaw. The paramedic beside me whispered, "Good, that is good, you are responsive." As they carried me toward the front door, voices rose behind us. My mother crying, my father insisting they were overreacting, my aunt whispering, "Please do not fight. Not now." Then the cold night air hit my skin as the paramedics maneuvered me out of the doorway. The sirens flashed red and blue across the driveway. Neighbors had wandered out, watching from their porches drawn by the ambulance lights. In our small Ohio neighborhood, nothing stayed quiet, and yet all I felt was shame. Even before I understood the truth of what happened, I felt shame. One paramedic climbed into the back of the ambulance beside me. Another secured the straps. The monitor beeped a steady rhythm. The female paramedic leaned close. "Emily, if you can hear me, we are taking you to Mercy General. You are safe." Her words felt far away, like they were floating on water, but I heard one more thing before the doors closed. A voice outside the ambulance, Uncle Bob's voice. "I will ride behind you. Do not leave her alone." Then softer broken in a way I had never heard. "This was my fault. I should have stopped him." The doors slammed shut, sealing me into the dim interior. The siren wailed to life. The ambulance pulled away. And for the first time since the chair struck my head, I realized something cold and undeniable. Whatever story my father had tried to force into existence, the paramedics had already seen through it. The EMS report would not lie for him, and neither, it seemed, would my uncle. The first thing I felt was weight, a heavy pressing weight pulling me down as if the world had collapsed onto my chest. The second thing was light, sharp and merciless even through my closed eyelids. I tried to move away from it, but my body refused to follow. My head throbbed in slow pulses, each beat radiating outward like ripples from a stone dropped into water. When I finally forced my eyes open, the ceiling above me came into view, washed in the sterile glow of hospital lights. A faint beep, steady and patient, filled the air beside me. The antiseptic smell of the ER settled into my lungs. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. I blinked slowly, each movement dragging against the fog inside my skull. Shapes shifted near my peripheral vision. Footsteps. A curtain brushing. Someone murmuring. The world felt too far away and too close at the same time. Then a voice spoke at my side, warm and steady. "Emily, can you hear me?" I turned slightly. A nurse leaned over me, her face calm, but focused her hand adjusting the monitor leads on my chest. "You are in Mercy General. You are safe. You came in with head trauma. You are going to feel disoriented for a while." Her words drifted through the cotton packed between my thoughts. Mercy General. ER. Trauma. I swallowed the action, scraping against a dry throat. My voice came out fragile. "What happened?" "You were brought in by ambulance. Significant impact to the head. We ran a CT scan." She paused and lowered her voice. "You have a concussion and a laceration that required stitches. But there is no bleeding in the brain. You are stable." I tried to nod, but pain shot down my neck. She lifted a hand. "Do not move too fast yet. Let your body catch up." A curtain rattled on the other side of my bed. Footsteps shuffled. Then I heard the familiar inhale of my mother's anxious breathing. She stepped inside, clutching her purse to her chest, her eyes already wet. "Emily, thank God." "You scared us to death." She rushed to my bedside and touched my arm as if expecting it to disappear beneath her fingers. I blinked, still trying to steady my vision. She looked exhausted, her mascara smudged beneath her eyes, her sweater wrinkled. Her voice trembled. "You fell. You slipped carrying the turkey." The words floated into the air with the ease of something rehearsed, something agreed upon, something expected. But before I could respond, another shape moved behind the curtain. My father. He stepped into the room with slow, deliberate strides, his face pulled tight into a mask of controlled concern. He did not look at me right away. Instead, he straightened his jacket and cleared his throat as if preparing to speak publicly rather than to his injured daughter. When he finally lifted his gaze to me, his expression was soft, almost tender. You took quite a spill. Gave everyone a scare." He said it like he believed it, like we all should believe it. Memories surged upward, but not clearly. Just fragments. My hands. The turkey, the platter slipping, then the chair, the sickening crack, my body hitting the floor, my father's voice shouting. The nurse stepped closer to check my vitals. I saw her glance between me and my family with a careful expression the kind professionals wear when they sense a tension they cannot name yet. My father moved around the bed, placing himself near the footrail where the nurse could not easily block him. He offered a gentle smile that did not touch his eyes. "We told them you tripped. It happens. Nothing to worry about. Just rest and do what the doctors say." I stared at him. The hospital lights reflected against the faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. His hands were clasped too tightly. There were red marks across his knuckles. My mother shifted beside him, nodding quickly as if the speed of her agreement could make the story more true. "Yes, sweetheart, you fell. It was just an accident, everyone saw." Everyone! The repetition lodged itself under my ribs. Everyone saw. A subtle warning. A reminder. A demand. Something inside me tightened as if my ribs were trying to shield my heart. The nurse looked at my mother. "I will give you a moment, but let her rest. She is still in post-trauma observation." As soon as the nurse stepped out, my father exhaled more heavily than the motion required. His voice dropped lower. Listen to me. You slipped. That is what happened. Do not make this harder than it needs to be." I opened my mouth, but pain pulsed behind my eyes, turning my words to dust. I swallowed again, trying to catch hold of the memory. The chair, the impact, Uncle Bob shouting, someone calling for help, someone else yelling not to call. But when I looked at my father now, he seemed so controlled, so composed that doubt slid into me like fog across cold ground. Had I imagined the chair? Had I dreamed it in the chaos? My mother pressed her palm over mine, squeezing too tightly. "We are just glad you are awake," she whispered. Her voice quivered. "Families have accidents on holidays all the time. No one needs to talk about this anymore. Just focus on healing." I stared at her hand gripping mine. Her wedding ring glinted in the light. Her nails were chipped. She had been crying, but she would still rather lie to preserve the illusion than face what actually happened. A quiet dread seeped into my bones. My father stepped closer, blocking the light. His voice carried a warning even in its softness. "Let it go, Emily. Just let it go." Before I could respond, the curtain rustled again. A doctor wearing navy scrubs walked in holding a chart. Her presence filled the room with a steady authority that even my father could not overshadow. "Good you are awake," she said, offering me a small but sincere smile. "I am Dr. Moore. I reviewed your scan. You have a concussion and you are going to need monitoring for a while." She glanced at my father and mother briefly, then focused entirely on me. "Can you tell me what you remember?" My heart thudded once painfully. My father's posture stiffened. My mother's breath caught. I opened my mouth. The doctor waited, expression calm but attentive. The words pressed against my throat, but my father stepped closer, placing a hand on the rail of my bed. "She fell," he said. "Firm. Absolute. She knows that." The doctor did not look at him. She looked at me. Her tone remained gentle. "Emily, I need to hear your version. How did you get this injury?" The room shrank around me. My mind swirled. My father's eyes drilled into me like a command. My mother held her breath. The memory of the chair flashed behind my eyelids again. The weight, the sound, the pain, but the words would not come. Not yet. My throat tightened. I whispered, "I do not know. I think I slipped." The doctor did not react outwardly, but something in her gaze sharpened. She nodded slowly, made a note on her chart, and said, "We will talk more later. For now, rest." I watched her walk away, feeling something twist inside my chest. Because even though I had spoken the words my father wanted, the truth clung to the edges of my memory like bruises waiting to surface. And the look in Dr. Moore's eyes told me she knew it. The day after I woke up in the ER, memory arrived in fragments, drifting in and out like pieces of a dream I was not sure I wanted to claim as real. The hospital room buzzed with distant beeping and rolling carts, but my mind kept slipping backward, pulled toward the house I grew up in, the place where silence was a second language and fear lived in the dry wall. Lying there under harsh fluorescent lights, I felt the past press against me, insistent and cold. I had spent years convincing myself that childhood memories become distorted over time, that trauma softens or sharpens depending on what the mind can tolerate. But what surfaced now came back with unsettling clarity. I remembered being 7, sitting at the kitchen table coloring while my parents argued in the next room. The walls were thin. My mother's voice trembled as she begged my father to calm down. Something crashed. The refrigerator rattled. I dropped my crayon and held my breath, already knowing the rules without anyone needing to teach them. Do not interrupt. Do not make it worse. Do not let anyone see you afraid. Later that night, my mother tucked me into bed, her smile shaky but determined. "Things get loud sometimes," she whispered. "You know your father loves you." I nodded because nodding required no thought, no courage. It was the safest answer. And the next morning, everything looked normal again, the evidence erased except for a dent in the pantry door that remained for years. My father called it an accident every time someone pointed it out. He laughed when he said it, daring anyone to question him. As I grew older, the household rhythms became predictable. Holidays meant forced harmony. Company meant perfect behavior. If my father's temper rose, the room fell silent and stayed that way until he declared the moment over. My mother learned how to redirect his moods with soft words and carefully timed distractions. My job was simpler. Stay quiet. Stay small. Stay useful. The quieter I was, the safer everyone felt. But every now and then the facade cracked. Once, when I was 13, I knocked over a glass of milk during dinner. It tipped in slow motion, splashing across the table and drip-ping onto my father's plate. He stood without a word, his chair scraped hard against the tile. I froze, heart slamming in my chest. He did not hit me that night, but the look he gave me carved itself into my memory, a look that promised punishment would come even if delayed. My mother quickly wiped the spill and kept her eyes down. Afterward, she sat beside me in my room, brushing my hair away from my face as if I were much younger. "You have to be more careful," she whispered. "He has a lot on his mind." Her words were meant to soothe, but what she really meant was clear. Do not provoke him. Silence is safety. Silence keeps the family intact. In high school, I started to understand that not every home worked this way. I would go to friends' houses and watch their parents joke around, argue, lightly resolve things without fear. The first time I saw a father apologize to his daughter for raising his voice, I felt something crack inside me. I did not know apology could exist in a house like mine. I did not know anger could be temporary rather than seismic. Still, when I returned home, the old patterns tightened around me again, familiar and suffocating. When I moved out at 19 to attend a local community college, I believed physical distance would undo the damage, but the emotional wiring remained. Even as an adult, whenever my father called, my voice softened automatically. Whenever my mother asked me to come home for holidays, I went. Not out of love, though I do love her, but because guilt is the heaviest chain a child can carry. The night before this year's Thanksgiving, I drove down our old street feeling my stomach knot the way it always did. Families in nearby houses had strung up early Christmas lights. Laughter echoed from porches. Someone was burning leaves 2 doors down, the smoke drifting low to the ground. Everything looked peaceful, and I wondered, not for the first time, how many houses hid the same kind of tension ours did. probably more than people admitted, but in ours it felt normal, expected, almost rehearsed. That is what made it dangerous. Abuse wrapped in tradition is harder to identify, harder to confront, harder to escape. Lying in the hospital now, I could still hear my father's voice from childhood. "Why are you crying? Stop being dramatic. I did not even touch you." Then later, when he was in a better mood, "You are too sensitive. Toughen up." My favorite lie was the one he told relatives. "Emily is shy. That is why she does not talk much." But shyness was not the issue. Silence had simply become the only safe option. It seeped into me the way cold seeps through old windows, quietly and relentlessly. Even now, at 28, the instinct remained. When Dr. Moore asked me what happened, I said nothing. When my father corrected my version, I let him. When my mother whispered reminders of the official story, I swallowed my questions and stayed quiet. Silence was the oldest habit I had, but as I lay there, listening to the hum of machines, a new question rose inside me, unwelcome and persistent. If silence kept us safe, why was I lying in a hospital bed with stitches in my head? Why did pain return every time I breathed? Why did the memory of the chair feel real, even if my voice refused to confirm it? I closed my eyes and saw the Thanksgiving table again. The glow of candles, the shimmer of my mother's good china, my father's shadow looming larger than the lights behind him, my uncle's face pale with disbelief. The moment the platter slipped from my hands replayed in my mind with brutal clarity. The thud of the turkey hitting the floor, the silence that followed, my father rising to his feet, bourbon glass half full, his angry inhale, the chair in his grip, the sudden swing, the crack of impact, my body falling, the spinning ceiling, Uncle Bob yelling, "Call 911," and my father's furious reply, "No one is calling." She slipped. The hospital bed creaked beneath me as I shifted. My scalp prickled near the stitches. The memory was not a dream. My body remembered even if my voice tried to forget. A deep ache spread across my ribs, not physical, but something older. A familiar sadness, a familiar loyalty. Families like mine were built on layers of silence carefully stacked across generations. My mother had learned it from her mother. I had learned it from her. The unspoken message was always the same. Endure it. Hide it. Protect the family image at all costs. I used to believe silence made us strong. Now it only made me small. A nurse came in to check my vitals, her footsteps soft, her expression neutral. She asked how my pain was adjusted my IV, and left. As she walked away, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the metal frame of a cabinet. I barely recognized myself. My face was pale, my eyes dull with exhaustion. There was a faint bruise blooming across my cheek. I looked like someone who had been hit, not someone who had slipped. For the first time, a thought surfaced that terrified me. Maybe silence was not safety anymore. Maybe it never had been. Maybe the house I grew up in, the one built on quiet compliance and carefully curated appearances, was not a home, but a structure held together with lies so old no one bothered to question them. And maybe it was beginning to crumble. I lay back against the thin pillow and let the truth settle over me like a weighty blanket. The house I grew up in had been built on silence. But silence had brought me here. Silence had nearly killed me. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what would happen if I broke it. Morning crept into the ER in thin, pale streaks that slid through the blinds and stretched across the floor like cautious footsteps. I had barely slept. Each time I closed my eyes, the memory of the chair flashed again, followed by the blur of voices, the cold floor, the sirens. I kept touching the edge of the bandage above my ear as if confirming that, yes, something had happened, and yes, it had left its mark. My mother had gone home sometime before dawn. She whispered that she needed to shower and reset the house before people started asking questions. She squeezed my hand, told me again that families have accidents, and left before I could respond. My father had left too, but not before pressing a final reminder into the air. "Rest up, Em. No need to complicate things." His tone had been even, but underneath it lay a warning sharpened by years of practice. "Keep the peace? Do not embarrass me. Do not change the story." After they left, I stared at the ceiling until the room blurred. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, administering pain medication, adjusting monitors. Each voice was gentle but unavoidably clinical. None of them asked what happened. Not yet. By mid-morning, I was sitting up slightly propped by stiff hospital pillows when a soft knock tapped against the doorframe. A woman stepped inside, wearing a badge clipped to her blue cardigan. She was older, maybe mid-50s, with dark curly hair pulled into a loose ponytail and reading glasses that dangled on a thin silver chain around her neck. She carried a tablet in one hand and a calm, determined expression. "Good morning, Emily," she said. "I am Karen Lewis, the ER social worker. I am here to check in with you." A strange tension prickled under my skin. Social workers did not usually visit unless someone had concerns, serious concerns. She pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down, leaving a comfortable distance between us. "I want to talk to you about what the EMS team documented during transport," she said. I felt my breath catch. My fingers twisted the edge of the blanket. She continued, carefully choosing each word. "The paramedics noted that your injuries do not seem consistent with a simple backward fall. According to their report, your wound appears lateral, as though caused by a force coming from the side." She paused, watching my reaction. "They also mentioned the position of furniture at the scene and statements made by others in the home." A pulse throbbed at my temple. I could feel the room tightening, as if the walls were leaning in. I had known this moment was coming. A part of me had felt it from the second the paramedics exchanged that look in my parents' dining room. Karen folded her hands. "I am not here to pressure you," she said softly, "but I am here to make sure you are safe and to make sure the medical team receives accurate information. The truth matters for your treatment, for your future, for your safety." Safety. The word struck something deep inside me, a place that had never fully exhaled in 28 years. My voice came out thin. "My father said I slipped." She nodded. "That is what he said, but I need to hear what you say." I swallowed hard. My eyes drifted toward the doorway, half expecting my father to appear and silence me with just a look. He was not there, but the habit of fear lingered like a shadow that never fully left the room. I do not remember everything I whispered. It was almost true. There were pieces I had not gathered yet, memories hidden beneath adrenaline and pain. But the biggest piece, the impact of the chair, was vivid enough to make me tremble. Karen did not try to fill the silence. She waited, patient, calm, intentional. It was the kind of waiting that gave me space rather than pressure. After a moment, she said the EMS crew documented that someone in the home argued against calling 911. "Does that sound right?" Uncle Bob's voice surfaced in my memory, frantic pleading. My father's voice followed, sharp, ordering the room to stay silent. I felt my throat tighten. My father did not want them to call. I said quietly. "He said I slipped. He said it was nothing." Karen inhaled slowly and her expression softened. "Thank you for telling me that." Something warm flickered in my chest, relief maybe, or fear of the truth becoming real now that I had spoken it even in small pieces. She tapped her tablet. "I want to reassure you of something. The EMS report is part of your medical record now. If something happened that night that is unsafe for you, the medical team is obligated to make sure you are protected." She looked at me steadily. "You do not have to protect anyone at the expense of your own well-being." I stared at my bandaged head, my fingers trembling against the blanket. Protect anyone. That was all I had done for years. Protect my mother from his moods. Protect family gatherings from falling apart. Protect the illusion of normalcy. Protect the man who never protected me. Karen's voice softened. "Has anything like this happened before?" I hesitated, but the truth pressed against me like a door waiting to be opened. "Not like this," I said. "But he gets angry. Sometimes things get loud. Sometimes things break. Sometimes I hide." She nodded slowly, her voice steady. "That is important." Thank you for being honest." The room felt both heavier and lighter, as if an invisible weight had shifted from my shoulders to the air around us. I wiped a tear I had not noticed forming. "What happens now?" "For the moment, nothing you need to fear," she said. "The hospital will complete its documentation and your physician will review everything. They may ask more questions to ensure your injuries match the explanation given. It is routine in cases of head trauma where the mechanism is unclear. She hesitated before adding, I believe someone else may come speak to you as well, depending on the findings. My stomach nodded. Someone else meant someone official, someone who did not abide by family scripts, someone who could cut through lies my father had polished for years. Karen placed a gentle hand on the side rail. You are not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. You were hurt, and now we need to understand how. With that, she stood and gave me a kind, parting smile before slipping out of the room. After she left, the silence returned, but it felt different than the silence at home. This one felt like possibility, not punishment. Still, fear curled inside me. If the EMS report had raised questions, the hospital would not ignore them. And if the hospital pursued the truth, my father would not forgive it. The curtain rustled again. The doctor entered this time, Dr. Moore, holding a printed page in her hand. She set the paper on the foot of my bed, her expression grave but calm. This is a summary of the EMS assessment, she said. I want you to read it when you feel ready. It documents several inconsistencies between the injury location and the explanation given. I stared at the page but did not move to pick it up. My pulse raced even though my body lay perfectly still. Dr. Moore continued, Your safety is our priority. If there is something you need to tell us at any point, we will support you fully. You do not owe anyone protection if it puts you in danger. The words hit me like a deep, slow exhale. Something loosened in my chest, the faintest release of pressure built over decades. After she left, I reached for the paper with slow, unsteady fingers. The text blurred at first, then sharpened into sentences that made my stomach twist. Impact force sideways, inconsistent with misstep or backward fall. Witness attempted to prevent emergency activation. Possible non-accidental trauma. I let the paper fall onto my lap, my heart pounding. For years, my family had hidden the truth behind a wall of silence. Now, a single 2-page report had knocked a crack straight through it, and I did not know whether to feel terrified or relieved that someone else finally saw what I had been taught never to say. The afternoon light slanted across the ER walls in soft, muted bands by the time my Uncle Bob finally stepped through the doorway. I had been waiting for him without admitting it to myself. Every time footsteps passed in the hall, my heartbeat lifted before settling again. My parents came and went in tight, controlled cycles, always with reminders disguised as concern. My mother brought a sweater. My father brought silence so heavy it filled the corners of the room. But Uncle Bob had not come. Not until now. When he appeared in the doorway, he looked older than he had just 24 hours before. His shoulders hunched inward, as if trying to hide the tremor running through him. His usually neat gray hair was disheveled, and he held his cap tight in both hands, squeezing the brim until it folded. Seeing him like that stirred something inside me. He was not a man who rattled easily. He moved slowly across the room, each step cautious, like he was approaching a wounded animal and feared startling it. When he reached my bedside, he swallowed hard. "Emily," he whispered. "Oh, kiddo." His voice cracked on the second word. For a moment, all he did was stand there staring at me with eyes filled with something between heartbreak and guilt. I had never seen that combination on him before. I tried to sit up a little straighter, but the pain pulsed behind my temples and kept me still. "Hi, Uncle Bob," I murmured. My words wavered. He lowered himself into the chair by my bed with a heavy exhale and set his crushed cap on his knee. His hands shook when he reached for mine, and when his fingers finally closed around my palm, he let out a shaky breath. "I saw it," he whispered. His voice barely rose above the soft beep of the heart monitor. I saw everything. My breath caught in my throat. Part of me had known he was there, that he had witnessed the moment I was still trying to piece together in my mind. But hearing him admit it brought a different kind of pressure, a weight settling into the space between us. The truth hovered like a fragile bird, waiting for permission to land. He squeezed my hand again. I should have stopped him. I should have grabbed that chair or shouted louder or done something, anything. His words tumbled out in uneven bursts. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, letting the confession settle. It felt heavier than anything he had ever carried. Uncle Bob had always been gentle. He rarely raised his voice and never once confronted my father in any meaningful way. He was the peacekeeper, the soft landing, the man who fixed toys quietly at the kitchen table while the adults argued in the next room. I remembered being a kid hiding behind him during loud moments, standing behind his leg because it felt like the safest place in the house. Now he looked more frightened than I felt. "Uncle Bob," I whispered. "It is not your fault." He dropped his gaze to the floor. His voice came out low and rough. "It is. It is every bit my fault. I have been watching your father do this to your mother for years. To you in smaller ways. Not like this, but still wrong." I never said a word. Ever. I always told myself it was not my place, that I should not interfere in another man's home. But yesterday, he stopped to swallow. His Adam's apple bobbed. Yesterday, I saw him raise that chair. I saw the look in his eyes. I knew what was coming, and I did nothing until it was too late. For a moment, neither of us moved. The machine beside me beeped steadily, indifferent to the unraveling happening in the room. Uncle Bob ran a hand over his face. I could see the regret etched into every line. I tried to remember Thanksgiving before the chaos. He had been smiling then, laughing at something one of my cousins said. He had always approached holidays with the hope that this year would be different, that the Carter house would behave itself. But hope never stood a chance against patterns carved over decades. He finally looked at me. "Emily, I need to hear it from you. Did he strike you?" The question sat between us, trembling like a thread about to snap. I opened my mouth, but no words came. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I wanted to speak, but the years of training of swallowed truths and buried bruises sealed my voice shut. I looked away. Uncle Bob nodded slowly. He understood even without my answer, because silence in our family was never lack of confirmation. It was confirmation itself. I saw something shift in him then, something small but seismic. He leaned forward, bracing his elbows on his knees. "I spoke with the nurse," he said quietly. "She told me the EMS report raised questions about your injury. They know something is off. They will probably ask more." His voice trembled. "They should ask. They should know." I waited for him to continue, for him to say what he had come here to say. But instead, he let out a long, shuddering exhale and shook his head. "Emily, I want to do right by you. But the truth is, if this goes further, your father will lose everything. His job, his standing, his reputation, everything." The words struck like a slap. I stared at him, unable to hide the sting that spread through my chest. So that is what this was. Not just guilt, not just sorrow. Fear. Fear of the fallout. Fear of the consequences he had spent a lifetime avoiding. My voice came out brittle. "And what about me? Do I not matter?" His face crumpled. "Of course you matter, Emily. You matter more than anything. But families get destroyed over things like this. Once the police get involved, there is no undoing it." He rubbed his palms together as if trying to warm them. "I am ashamed to say it, but I am scared. He is my brother. I have known him my whole life, and I have seen what happens when he is cornered. If I speak up—" He trailed off, but I knew the end of the sentence. He feared retaliation. He feared fracturing the fragile structure our family pretended was a home, and he feared losing the brother who had already been lost to anger years ago. Silence wrapped around us again. This time it felt colder. He looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "I am sorry, kiddo. I want to be stronger, but I cannot be the one to start this. I should have stopped him, but I cannot be the one who ends him." The disappointment hit so sharply I had to close my eyes. I felt my heartbeat thud against my ribs. I had hoped for something from him, maybe not a miracle, but a push against the silence. Instead, he retreated the same way everyone in my family had always retreated, back into fear, back into loyalty, back into the shadows where truth was easier to swallow than speak. He stood slowly, his knees cracking. He picked up his cap with shaking fingers. "You just focus on getting better," he said quietly. "I will come visit again." Then he hesitated halfway to the door. His voice cracked one last time. "I am so sorry, Emily." Then he left, letting the curtain fall shut behind him. I stared at the space he had occupied, feeling a slow ache roll through my chest. Uncle Bob had seen everything, and still, he chose silence, just like my mother, just like the house I grew up in. And for the first time since waking in that ER bed, I felt truly alone. When the hospital finally discharged me 2 days later, I felt as though I was being released into a world that looked the same but no longer felt familiar. The concussion made everything slightly off-center, as if the ground shifted half an inch with every step. The printed discharge summary sat in my lap as my mother drove us home, her grip on the steering wheel so tight, her knuckles blanched. She had insisted on picking me up alone. My father stayed home to prepare the house, she'd said, though I wasn't sure what that meant. Clean up the blood he refused to acknowledge. Move the chair he claimed had never been lifted. Erase any reminder that might conflict with the story he needed everyone to believe. My mother spoke softly on the drive, filling the silence with reassurances I hadn't asked for. You just need rest. The doctor said you'll be tired. Try not to think about anything stressful. Everyone's relieved you're okay. Her words piled up like blankets, smothering rather than comforting. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched the bare Ohio trees blur past their branches stark against the dull winter sky. When we turned onto my parents' street, something inside me tensed. The house looked exactly the same as it always had: neat lawn wreath on the door, a string of early Christmas lights along the porch. You'd never know what had happened inside. As soon as we stepped into the foyer, the air changed. It felt heavier, thicker, like the walls were holding their breath. My father appeared at the end of the hallway, hands tucked into the pockets of his flannel shirt, a calculated expression on his face. Not guilt, not remorse. A calm expectation that I would fall seamlessly back into the role I had played my entire life. "Emily," he said, nodding slightly. "How you feeling?" The ordinary tone of his voice hit me harder than any chair. "I'm okay," I murmured, though my head throbbed and my knees wobbled. "Good," he said. "You're lucky it wasn't worse. Slips like that can be nasty." The lie slid from his mouth without hesitation. He had told it so many times now that he sounded almost sincere. My mother guided me to the couch, fluffing pillows, adjusting blankets, fussing with the thermostat. The gestures were tender, familiar, and painfully hollow. She sat beside me, smoothing my hair away from the bandage. "Try not to move too much," she whispered. "Let your father handle things today." I wasn't sure what things meant, but her voice carried the same old undertone. Defer to him. Keep the peace. Maintain the story. My father settled into his recliner across from us as though nothing in the world had shifted. He turned on the television, the football game humming in the background, its ordinary noise clashing with the storm churning in my chest. After a few minutes, he looked over at me. "The hospital talked to you," he said. It wasn't a question. Karen, the social worker, flashed in my mind. Dr. Moore asking about the mechanism of injury. The EMS report calling everything into doubt. "Yes," I whispered. "They asked about the fall." My father nodded slowly, studying my face. "And you told them what happened. You slipped while carrying the turkey." "Right." The room seemed to tilt. I swallowed. I don't remember everything clearly. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "You fell, Emily." End of story. My mother squeezed my hand. "Sweetheart, you don't want to create confusion. The doctors already think you're overwhelmed. Just focus on getting better." Confusion. Overwhelmed. The words wrapped around my doubts like vines. For a moment, I almost let them take root. The concussion had fogged my thoughts. The memory of the impact came in flashes. The chair, the sound, the cold floor. Maybe it was possible I'd imagined the exact details. Maybe shock distorted things. Maybe I fell and my mind had filled in the rest. But then I shifted slightly on the couch and pain shot through the right side of my head, the same place I'd felt the blow, the exact spot where the stitches pulled against my skin. A fall backwards wouldn't have landed there. The memory wasn't wrong. The world around me simply wanted it to be. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know hospital staff like to complicate things. They write their reports, imagine worst-case scenarios. But we know what happened in this house. Families stick together when outsiders start poking around." He paused, narrowing his eyes. "You understand that, don't you?" A familiar coldness spread across my chest. This wasn't a conversation, it was conditioning. A lifetime of correction disguised as guidance. Before I could respond, my Aunt Marianne appeared in the doorway, carrying a casserole dish still warm beneath foil. She tiptoed inside as if mourning a death rather than visiting a recovering relative. "Oh, darling," she breathed, approaching me with a soft, sad smile. "We were so worried." She glanced at my father, then back to me. "I heard you slipped." Must have been terrifying. The unease in her eyes betrayed her. She didn't believe it, not fully, but in this family disbelief was something you swallowed whole. My father exhaled sharply. "Enough hovering. Let her rest." Marianne retreated into the kitchen. My mother followed her, leaving me alone with him. The silence thickened between us. He let it stretch before speaking again. "Emily." His voice dropped to the tone he used when delivering consequences disguised as care. "You are making this harder than it needs to be. No one wants trouble. No one wants to see this family torn apart. Not over a simple accident." He let accident hang in the air, daring me to challenge it. My hands tightened around the blanket. I could feel the gaslighting settling around me like a fog thick enough to choke on. It had worked my whole life. It had shaped me, my thoughts, my reactions. I had been trained to doubt my pain before I ever doubted his version of events. My father continued, "I need you to be smart about this. The hospital might ask more questions, but you just tell them the truth. You fell. You are clumsy sometimes, always have been." A flash of childhood memory struck me hard, his voice booming across the kitchen after I dropped a glass at age 10. "Look what you did. Can't you do anything right?" My mother cleaning shards quietly, my father muttering useless. I swallowed the memory down. My father softened his tone. "You don't want to make people think you are unstable, do you? You had a head injury. Sometimes people imagine things after a hit like that." My heart thudded painfully. He wasn't just denying what happened, he was rewriting it, rebuilding reality around his version brick by brick, and he expected me to climb inside it willingly. My mother returned with tea. She sat on the edge of the couch and touched my arm lightly. "Sweetheart, your father is right. You've been through so much. Don't let stress make things worse. Everyone here loves you. We just want things to go back to normal." Normal. The word struck me like another blow. Normal had always meant quiet obedience, pretending, protecting him, sacrificing myself. I looked between them, feeling the familiar pull, the old reflex to shrink, reshape, and slip into the space where they wanted me to fit. But the hospital room drifted through my mind. Karen telling me you do not owe anyone protection. Dr. Moore's steady gaze. The EMS report calling everything inconsistent. Those outsiders had seen truth I had been trained to deny. My father studied me carefully. "You are not thinking of saying anything else, are you?" His voice dropped lower, colder. "You know how people judge, how quickly rumors spread. This could ruin our family, ruin me. And for what? A bruise you barely remember." The quiet fury in his tone chilled me. He wasn't asking for understanding. He was demanding allegiance. My mother whispered, "Emily, please, just let this go." I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt myself slipping back into silence, the silence that shaped my entire life. But then a sharp sting pulsed at my wound, and an image surfaced so clear it stole my breath. My father lifting the chair, my uncle shouting, "Stop!" The crack. The floor rising. The truth surged up uninvited, undeniable. I opened my eyes and looked at both of them. Really looked. My father with his steady, unnerving certainty. My mother with her trembling, forced smile. Two people who had chosen silence so often they no longer recognized anything else. I swallowed hard. "I need to rest," I said. My voice was flat, expressionless. My father watched me a second longer, assessing whether I was still under his thumb. Finally, he nodded and stood. "Good. Rest. Clear your head. Remember what happened, and remember what didn't." When he left the room, the air loosened just enough for me to breathe again. My mother kissed my forehead. "I'll make soup," she whispered. Everything will be fine." She hurried into the kitchen. I stared at the ceiling, feeling both fragile and strangely awake. They expected me to fold back into silence, but something inside me had shifted. Maybe the concussion rattled something loose. Maybe being confronted with the EMS report cracked the facade. Or maybe for the first time I realized silence had never been protection. It had been surrender. And I wasn't sure I wanted to surrender anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I drifted toward a rest, pain radiated from the stitches along my scalp, pulling me sharply awake again. The house was dark, aside from the faint glow under my parents' bedroom door, where the murmur of their voices rose and fell like the tide. Even without hearing their words, I knew the rhythm. My mother fretting, my father controlling the narrative, rewriting the truth into something he could live with, something he expected all of us to live with. I lay on the couch wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of pine detergent, staring at the ceiling until the lines between the shadows seemed to pulse. My discharge papers sat on the coffee table where my mother left them earlier, their white edges crisp and sterile in the dim light. I kept glancing at them but couldn't bring myself to reach for them. Not yet. My head throbbed in slow pulses. My body felt heavy. My thoughts felt like threads pulled in too many directions. But eventually, curiosity gnawed through the dread, and I forced myself upright, careful not to let the sudden movement send lightning through my skull. I took a deep breath and picked up the papers. The first page listed basic information diagnosis: concussion laceration requiring 6 stitches, observation recommended, return immediately if symptoms worsen. Nothing surprising, nothing threatening. But then my fingers slid to the next page, the one Dr. Moore had emphasized before leaving the room that morning. Mechanism of injury questionable. Injury pattern inconsistent with reported account. The words were clinical, detached, professional, but they punched a hole straight through the flimsy story my parents had wrapped around me. Lateral force impact. Contusion on right temporal region. Depth and angle suggesting object driven into patient, not patient driven into object. My mouth went dry. The words swam slightly on the page, but they were unmistakable. My head didn't hit the floor first. Something hit me. Hard. I closed my eyes and allowed the memory to come fully this time. Not in flashes, not from a distance, but as a whole. The way the room fell silent after the platter broke. The way my father's shadow stretched across the table. The sudden terrifying lift of the wooden chair. The weight of it rushing toward me. The crack. The world spinning sideways. It wasn't imagined. It wasn't shock. It wasn't the concussion distorting things. It was the truth. My breath came shallow and fast. I gripped the papers harder. The sound of quiet footsteps startled me. My mother stepped into the living room wearing a robe, her expression soft but cautious, like she already sensed the shift in me. "You're awake," she whispered. "I thought you'd be asleep by now." I didn't respond immediately. She moved closer and sat beside me, folding her hands in her lap. Her face was tired, older, fragile in a way I hadn't noticed before. "Are you in pain?" she asked, reaching toward my forehead. I gently pulled back. "I'm fine. Just reading." Her gaze flicked to the papers in my hand. Her breath hitched almost imperceptibly. "Oh," she murmured. "Those." "Yes. These," I said quietly. She pressed her lips together. "Hospitals always over-document. You know how it is. They assume the worst. It's routine." She said the words calmly, but her fingers twisted in her lap. I lifted the paper slightly. "It says my injuries don't match a fall. It says they're inconsistent with what you and Dad told them." My mother's face paled. "Emily, please don't start pushing this. You hit your head. You're confused. You know how memory works after trauma." I stared at her, feeling something inside me shift from trembling confusion to a slow, rising clarity. "I'm not confused." She blinked hard, her breathing quickening. Her hands fluttered as if searching for something to hold on to. "Sweetheart, think about what you're implying. Think about what that would mean." "I have thought about it," I said. "More clearly than I've thought about anything in years." She shook her head. "No. No, Emily. This is not who we are. Families have accidents. We move forward. We don't tear each other apart over mistakes." "Mistakes?" The word cut deeper than any blow could have. "Mom," I whispered. He lifted a chair. He swung it at me. Her whole body flinched, though she tried to hide it. Her voice cracked. "You're misremembering." "You must be. Your father would never deliberately hurt you. He loves you." That was the script. The Carter family doctrine. Love excuses everything as long as the doors stay closed and the noise doesn't wake the neighbors. I let out a trembling breath. "Mom, I saw him. I remember." Her eyes filled, instantly overflowing before she could shift away. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she covered her face. "This family will fall apart," she choked out. "If you say things like that, the whole family will collapse. He could lose his job. People will talk. They'll judge us. They'll think we're monsters." She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for him, for the image, for the reputation of a man who had built his identity on being respected. Her tears hurt more than the memory itself. I felt myself leaning back into old habits, wanting to comfort her, wanting to shrink so her world wouldn't break. But something inside me pushed upward against years of practiced silence. "Mom," I said more firmly. "He hurt me. I didn't slip." The discharge papers trembled in my hands. My mother dried her cheeks quickly, fear flickering across her expression. "Emily, you cannot say that again." "Do you hear me?" "You cannot." She grabbed my wrist gently but desperately. "You have to stop before this goes too far. The doctors will ask more questions. The social worker may call again. If you start changing the story now, they'll think something terrible happened. Something criminal." Silence fell between us like a stone sinking to the bottom of a lake. "Something criminal did happen," I whispered. My mother froze as if the air had been sucked from the room. Her tears stopped. Her breath halted. Her grip on my wrist loosened but didn't fall away. I met her eyes. For the first time in my life, I didn't look away. Her voice emerged in a fractured whisper. "Emily, please don't destroy our family." I shook my head slowly. "I'm not the one who broke it." She recoiled as though the sentence struck her physically. Her hands slipped from mine. Her shoulders hunched inward. And then she whispered something so soft, I almost missed it. "You don't understand your father. He grew up with a temper. His father was worse. He's always been under pressure. He is trying. He's trying to do better." I stared at her stunned. Generational excuses laid out like stepping stones leading nowhere but deeper into the same darkness. I whispered, "He could have killed me." The truth of it echoed in my skull, louder than the blow itself. The color drained from her face and she shut her eyes. A trembling exhale escaped her lips. "I know," she whispered. The admission came so unexpectedly that my breath faltered. She opened her eyes and looked at me, her expression etched with fear. "I know he could have, and I am terrified, but I don't know how to stop him. I never have, and I don't know how to survive if everything comes out." The vulnerability in her voice cracked me open. I realized then she wasn't just afraid of losing him. She was afraid of losing the version of life she had built around him, the structure, the routine, the illusion, the silence. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I didn't look away. "Mom," I whispered, "I need you to choose me this time. Not him. Not the reputation. Me." She hesitated long enough to give me my answer. After several moments, she stood slowly adjusting her robe with trembling fingers. "You should rest," she said quietly. Her voice was distant, hollow. "I'll check on you in the morning." She walked away before I could say another word. As the house sank into silence again, I looked down at the discharge paper still trembling in my hands. The medical truth was clear. The wounds on my body told a story my family refused to hear, but the hospital had seen it. The EMS report had documented it, and somewhere beneath his fear, Uncle Bob knew it. The truth was no longer only mine to carry. It lived in evidence now, in ink, in bruises, in memory. And in that moment, I understood something with stunning clarity. My family could gaslight me. They could pressure me. They could rewrite every moment until their voices drowned mine. But they could not erase the truth my body carried, and sooner or later someone else would demand to hear it. The next morning arrived slowly, dragging dawn behind it like a reluctant guest. I hadn't slept for more than a few scattered minutes at a time. Every time I drifted off the memory of the chair, the weight of my father's voice and the echo of my mother's plea rose like waves and pulled me awake again. By 7 a.m., my eyes felt gritty and the world carried the dull haze of exhaustion mixed with pain. My parents moved around the house quietly, too quietly, like they were trying not to disturb something fragile. Or someone fragile. Maybe me. Maybe the story they were barely holding together. My father left early, saying he needed to show his face at work, so no one asked questions. My mother made oatmeal I didn't eat and talked about ordinary things as though the previous days were a dream we could politely ignore. But my stomach churned as I watched her stir sugar into her coffee with trembling hands. Nothing was ordinary now. When it was time for my follow-up appointment at Mercy General, she insisted on driving me again. The ride was silent except for the hum of the heater and the occasional soft squeal of brakes on winter-worn roads. Outside, snow flurries dusted the edges of mailboxes and fence posts. The world looked peaceful in a way that mocked everything twisting inside me. When the hospital entrance came into view, a shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know if it was fear or relief, maybe both. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee from the kiosk near the front desk. A nurse called my name and guided me through a hallway lined with closed doors. Each door felt like a threshold to a truth I couldn't avoid much longer. My mother stayed behind in the waiting room. "They'll want to speak to you alone," she murmured, as if hoping I'd hear the subtext. "Remember our story. Don't make this worse." The nurse led me into a private exam room and checked my vitals, her tone, kind but efficient. She asked about dizziness, nausea, headache, intensity. I answered mechanically. Everything felt mechanical. When she left the room, fell quiet, except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. I stared at the medical poster opposite the bed, a diagram of cranial nerves branching like roots across a skull. Somewhere in those branching lines, my own pain lived. After several minutes, the door opened again and Dr. Moore stepped inside. She carried a tablet in one hand and closed the door gently behind her. Her expression was calm but serious, and the moment her eyes met mine, something inside me tightened. She greeted me warmly and asked a few routine questions about my symptoms. I answered, fidgeting with the sleeve of my sweater. Then she pulled up a chair and sat directly across from me, her knees almost touching mine. "Emily," she said softly, "I want to revisit the mechanism of your injury." My heartbeat quickened. I nodded stiffly. She continued in that same gentle tone. "Now that the swelling has gone down, it's clear where the primary point of impact was." Her eyes held mine in a way that made avoidance impossible. The bruise and laceration on the side of your head are not consistent with falling straight backward. Not from slipping. They're consistent with being struck by something. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. She just waited. The air thinned around me. Her voice softened even more. "Emily, did someone hit you?" The question landed like the sudden snap of a rope pulled too tight. The pressure building inside me for days finally jolted. My breath shuddered out of me as my throat closed around words I'd been trying to swallow. My hands shook violently and tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. I tried to breathe, but the question echoed again in my head, louder this time. "Did someone hit you? Did someone hit you? Did someone hit you?" My lips parted. A sound came out small and broken. She reached gently for my hand, but she didn't push, didn't fill the silence, didn't lead me anywhere. She let the truth surface at its own pace. That scared me more than anything. Kindness can unravel a person quicker than violence. My chest tightened painfully. I wiped my eyes with trembling fingers, but more tears came. I tried again. "I don't know," I whispered, even though knowing was no longer the problem. Speaking was. Speaking made it real. Speaking made consequences real. Speaking broke the rules of my family. Dr. Moore studied my face, reading every hesitation, every tremor. Her voice remained steady. "It's okay if this is difficult. You've been through a trauma, but you are safe here, and we need to understand what really happened so we can protect you." Protect? The word ripped something open in me. I had never heard that word used about me in a way that felt genuine. My family used protect to mean conceal, preserve the image, maintain the silence. Dr. Moore meant something else, something loud, something dangerous. I shook my head, overwhelmed. My father says I choked out. My mother says I'm confused. And what do you say? Her question sliced straight through me. I squeezed my eyes shut, and behind the darkness the memory crashed forward with merciless clarity. The chair rising in my father's hands, the fear crackling in the air, the strike, the pain, the floor rushing up, the desperate cry of my uncle. I covered my face with both hands and cried harder than I had in years. I didn't fall. I finally whispered into my palms. She leaned closer, voice unwavering. Emily, did your father hit you? The room seemed to tilt. The fluorescent lights buzzed. My ears rang. My entire life pressed against that question, crushing me from the inside. Saying yes meant admitting my family wasn't loving, but violent. Saying yes meant stepping out of the script I'd lived in for almost 3 decades. Saying yes meant burning every bridge my parents had built from silence. But saying no meant betraying myself, betraying the truth, betraying the person lying unconscious on the hardwood floor, screaming inside for someone to acknowledge what happened. My voice emerged as a sob. I think so. It wasn't a loud confession. It wasn't even a full one. But the moment the words left my mouth, my body shook with relief and terror in equal measure. Dr. Moore squeezed my hand gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know how hard that was, but you did the right thing." Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I felt like I was splitting open. She continued speaking slowly to make sure her words reached me clearly. "We are mandated to report injuries that suggest abuse or assault. Because you've disclosed this, I will need to notify the proper authorities. This isn't about punishing anyone, it's about ensuring your safety." My stomach twisted. The room dimmed around the edges. Report. Authorities. Police. The words clanged against my ribs like dropped metal. My mother's voice echoed faintly in my mind. "You'll destroy our family." My father's voice followed. "Remember what happened and what didn't." But now another voice rose above them both. My own, trembling, quiet, but alive. "Okay," I whispered. Dr. Moore nodded. "You're not alone in this. We'll walk through it step by step." She stood then and gently placed a box of tissues beside me. When she left the room, the door clicked softly behind her, and I was alone again. But the silence felt different than it ever had before. Not a prison, not a command. Something else. Something beginning. I wiped my face and looked down at my shaking hands. The truth was out. Not fully formed, not spoken in perfect words, but real enough to be heard. And once truth is spoken, even in fragments, it cannot easily be buried again. That night, after my appointment, after the question that finally unraveled me, the house felt colder than the Ohio winter settling outside. My mother barely spoke during dinner. She moved through the kitchen in quiet, jerky motions as though operating on muscle memory alone. I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, still dizzy from the day, still feeling Dr. Moore's words echo through my bones. "We will need to notify the proper authorities." Every breath I took felt like stepping deeper into a future I couldn't yet see but could already feel pressing dangerously close. I didn't know when things would begin to shift outside the hospital walls, but I knew it was coming. What I didn't expect was for the first shift to come from Uncle Bob. It happened close to midnight. I had finally drifted into a shallow, restless sleep on the couch, the TV flickering faint blue light across the room. The house was silent except for the faint murmur of my parents arguing behind their bedroom door. The walls weren't thick enough to hide tension. They never had been. Then my phone vibrated weakly against my hip. The sound was small, but in the quiet house it felt like a siren. My eyes opened slowly. The screen glowed with a name I hadn't expected at that hour. Uncle Bob. My throat tightened. For a moment, I simply stared at the phone, afraid of what picking up might mean. But something in me already knew. I answered. His voice came through trembling ragged around the edges, as if worn down by hours of holding something in. "Emily." His voice cracked. "Kiddo, I can't do this." I sat upright too quickly and pain shot through my skull, but I didn't care. His breathing filled the line, uneven, strained. "Are you okay?" I whispered. "No," he said. "No, I'm not. Not even a little." The room tilted a little, not from dizziness, but from the weight of what I heard in his voice. Guilt, fear, resolve. He took a shaky breath. "I've been sitting here all night trying to pray, trying to think, trying to lie to myself. But I can't do it anymore. I can't pretend I didn't see what I saw." I gripped the blanket tighter. A mix of dread and relief washed over me so forcefully my breath hitched. His voice dropped lower, breaking. "Emily, your father didn't just lose his temper. He didn't just react. He meant to hurt you. He meant it when he swung that chair." He paused, inhaled sharply, then exhaled in a choked whisper. I saw it in his eyes. My own eyes burned. Tears rose uninvited. I had waited my whole life for someone in this family to see clearly. And now, finally, Uncle Bob did. But the cost of that clarity was tearing through him. He said, "You know, I've seen your father get angry. I've seen him yell, slam doors, throw things. But this, Emily, this was different. This was violence. Real violence." He hesitated and his voice cracked again. And then afterward, he tried to cover it up. He ordered people not to call 911. He threatened me with a look, and he didn't even check if you were breathing. A tremor ran through me. Hearing those details spoken aloud made the memory sharpen until it cut. I whispered, "Why are you telling me this now?" He let out a broken laugh. "You know exactly why. Because you told the doctor, didn't you? Because you broke the silence. Because you're braver than any of us were." I didn't answer. My silence was enough. He inhaled shakily. "After you left with the ambulance, I sat on the porch and prayed for hours. I prayed for your safety and for forgiveness. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw him lift that chair. I saw you fall. I heard the sound your body made when it hit the floor. I saw your mother frozen, and I realized something. That silence we've kept our whole lives doesn't protect anyone. It only protects him." A sob escaped me. Uncle Bob lowered his voice to a near whisper. "And I realized, if I stay silent now, I'm no better than he is." My heart clenched around the weight of his words. Then he said something I never expected. "Emily, I'm going to the hospital tomorrow. I'm making a witness statement." Time froze. I wiped my eyes with trembling fingers. "Uncle Bob, are you sure? You know what that means." He let out a long exhale weighted with decades. "Yeah, I know exactly what it means. It means the truth finally gets written down somewhere he can't erase it. It means I finally choose you instead of the damn Carter reputation." His voice finally cracked completely. "And it means I stop being a coward." My breath shook. I had waited for someone to choose me. I had waited 28 years for that. He continued even quieter now. "You need to understand something. I didn't come to this lightly. I've been thinking about your father for a long time, long before this happened. Things I saw when you were little, things I saw him do to your mother, things I ignored because ignoring was easier, comfortable, safe." He choked on the last word. "But comfortable silence nearly killed you. So that ends tonight." Tears streamed down my cheeks. Uncle Bob sniffed, struggling to hold himself together. He said, "I love your father, but I love the truth more. And I love you more than both." He let out one more shaky breath. "I'm going to do the right thing this time. I promise." When the call ended, the room felt impossibly still. My tears slowed, my breath steadied. My shaking stopped. Something warm flickered inside me. Hope. Fragile, trembling hope. But hope, nonetheless. The next morning, while my father was at work and my mother pretended nothing was wrong by reorganizing cupboards that didn't need reorganizing, Uncle Bob drove himself to Mercy General. He walked through the automatic doors, asked for the social worker by name, and said he needed to give a statement about an assault. Witness statements are not dramatic the way TV makes them. They are quiet. They are deliberate. They are devastating. Karen Lewis guided him into a small conference room with soft lighting and water in plastic cups. She hit record, and my uncle's voice, steady but breaking, told the truth for the first time in his life. He described the silence after the turkey fell. He described my father's face, the way the room froze, the sound the chair made when lifted. He described the arc of the swing, the sickening impact, the way my body twisted as it collapsed, the terror on his wife's face, the way my mother did not move. And then he admitted the part that broke him. I didn't stop him. He said it over and over again. I didn't stop him. Karen let him cry, then asked him to continue. He described the moment I wasn't breathing right away, the moment he screamed for help, the moment my father ordered him not to call, the moment he dialed anyway because he thought I was dying. When he finished, he exhaled in one long, shuddering breath. Karen placed a gentle hand on his shoulder and told him he had done the right thing, that his statement would be forwarded to the police, that he had given me something I had never been given before, a witness. That afternoon, Karen called me. Her voice was steady, but I heard the shift in it. "Emily," she said, "your uncle gave a formal statement today. It corroborates the concerns we had from your medical record." Her words lingered in the air like a verdict. "This creates a mandatory referral to law enforcement." I gripped the phone until my knuckles whitened, my chest tightened, my breathing quickened. But beneath all that, something steadied. Uncle Bob had crossed a line no one in my family had ever dared cross. He had chosen truth over fear, justice over silence me, over everything else. And that meant the world was about to change in ways none of us could stop. A fragile, trembling voice rose inside me. "It's okay. You can call them." Karen paused. "Emily, you're very brave." I wasn't brave. I was broken. But broken things sometimes let light through. That night, lying again on the couch beneath soft blankets that smelled like a house built on silence, I understood something new. My father wasn't the only one whose actions held power. Uncle Bob's truth had power too. And now that truth was on record, in ink, in audio, in a legal file my father could not charm or threaten away. I closed my eyes, and for the first time since waking in the ER, I felt something close to strength return to my chest. Not enough to stand, not enough to fight, but enough to breathe evenly, enough to know that whatever storm was coming next, I would not be facing it alone. The call from Karen came early the next morning, just as pale sunlight began pushing its way through the blinds. I was sitting on the couch again, wrapped in the same blanket, my body aching, my mind drifting in and out like a tide I no longer controlled. My mother was in the kitchen humming weakly, pretending everything was normal. Every clang of a dish made me flinch. When my phone vibrated, I recognized the hospital's number instantly. My stomach tightened. I answered with a soft hello, my voice already trembling. Karen's tone was warm, but undeniably firm. "Emily, I want to give you an update. Law enforcement has been notified because of the EMS report, because of your medical findings, and because of your uncle's witness statement. 3 pieces together created a force none of us could stop, not even my father with all his practiced charm and intimidation." I exhaled slowly, a shaky release of fear and inevitability. "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you for letting me know." She paused. "Officers may contact you today. They'll want to speak with you directly. You don't have to go anywhere. They'll come to you. You are not in trouble. They simply want to understand what happened." My pulse quickened. My palms went cold. Even though I had already broken the silence with Dr. Moore, the idea of saying the truth to police felt like stepping off a cliff onto ground I couldn't see. I hung up and sat frozen for several minutes. My mother appeared from the kitchen holding a mug of tea. She smiled faintly, her eyes swollen from lack of sleep. I could tell she'd heard enough to know something was shifting. Something big. "Who was that?" she asked. I swallowed. "The hospital." She nodded slowly, searching my face. "And what did they say?" It took everything in me to answer without looking away. "The police are coming." Her whole body stiffened. The mug trembled in her hands. She set it down quickly before it could spill. "Emily," she whispered, as if the air had been punched out of her. "What did you do?" The words struck with the familiar sting of blame, but something inside me had shifted. I straightened slightly against the couch cushion. "Mom," I said quietly, "I didn't do anything. They're coming because of the evidence, because of what happened." Her breath hitched. Her voice dropped as panic crept in. "You don't understand what this means. This will destroy your father. It will destroy us." But she didn't sound angry this time, just terrified. I wanted to tell her I was terrified too. Instead, I whispered, "I can't lie anymore." Her eyes glistened. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned away and hurried into the hallway, her footsteps sharp and uneven. The house fell into silence again. Not the usual quiet avoidance, but the suffocating kind that comes just before a storm breaks. 40 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door. Not loud, not aggressive, just firm, purposeful. My heart jolted. My mother froze mid-step. She looked at me with eyes wide and pleading. "Emily, please don't." But I didn't move toward her. I didn't move away either. I just sat there trembling. The knock came again. My mother exhaled shakily, then opened the door. 2 officers stood on the porch. One was a woman in her 40s with her hair pulled back tightly. Her partner, a man perhaps mid-30s, held a small notepad. Both were calm and professional. "Good morning, ma'am," the woman said. "We're with the Madison Police Department. We're looking for Emily Carter." My mother gripped the edge of the door, but forced a brittle smile. "Yes, she's inside recovering. We've been so worried." She slipped at Thanksgiving and hit her head. The officers exchanged a glance so subtle it could have been missed by anyone who hadn't spent a lifetime noticing when people didn't believe a story. The female officer nodded politely. "We'd like to speak with her if she's able." My mother hesitated, then stepped aside. The officers entered the living room. My pulse thudded in my ears. The female officer approached with a gentle smile. "Emily, I'm Officer Lane, and this is Officer Reynolds. We're here because the hospital made a mandated report. We'd like to ask you a few questions about your injuries, only if you're feeling up to it." I nodded despite my body trembling. I forced myself to sit up straighter on the couch. My mother hovered behind me like a shadow, but Officer Lane gently motioned for her to stay back. To my surprise, my mother stepped away without arguing. Fear can silence even the fiercest protectors of lies. Officer Reynolds began with simple questions. Your full name, your age, your address before the incident. I answered automatically. Then his voice softened. Can you tell us what you remember from Thanksgiving evening? My throat tightened. Suddenly, the room felt too small, too bright, too loud, and too quiet all at once. My hands shook. I inhaled slowly. The turkey fell, I whispered. And then everything went quiet. I lifted my eyes and saw their attention sharpen. Not aggressive. Encouraging. Safe. I swallowed hard. I remember my father standing up. I remember him yelling. And then I paused. My breath trembled. Officer Lane leaned slightly closer, her voice gentle. Emily, take your time. I closed my eyes and let the memory rise again. This time I didn't push it down. He picked up a chair. My mother let out a small strangled sound from across the room. I didn't stop. He swung it, I whispered. It hit the side of my head. The officers didn't flinch, but their stillness changed. Focus sharpened. Jaw tightened. Pins stilled. That shift told me everything. They believed me. They believed the truth my family had spent years pretending didn't exist. Officer Reynolds asked, "What did your father do after that?" My voice felt faint. He told everyone not to call 911. He said I slipped. Officer Lane exchanged another subtle glance with her partner, and it was clear now they weren't just gathering information. They were building a case. She gently asked, "Did anyone else see this happen?" My breath slowed. "Yes, my Uncle Bob, and most of the family at the table." My mother whispered, "Emily, please stop," but Officer Lane held up a hand without even looking back. "Ma'am, we need to hear your daughter's account." After a moment, my mother fell silent. Her breathing was audible, quick, faint. Officer Reynolds asked, "Do you feel safe in this home?" The question cracked something inside me. My voice emerged as a whisper. "No, I don't." Saying those words out loud made the room tilt. They were the most honest words I had ever spoken about my family. Something shifted in the officer's posture, a decision clicking into place. Officer Lane leaned forward slightly. "Emily, based on what you've told us and the evidence from the hospital, we will be moving forward with this investigation. We may need to return for additional statements. We may need to speak with your father. We may need to collect the chair." Her tone became even gentler. "And we want you to know, you did the right thing by telling the truth." My mother let out a sob and covered her mouth. I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't a burden I carried alone. It lived in official notes and EMS reports and witness statements. It had weight now, legal weight. After a few more questions, the officer stood. Before leaving, Officer Lane lowered her voice. "Emily, if at any point you feel unsafe, you can call us. Day or night. You don't have to stay here." The warmth in her words nearly shattered me. As they stepped outside, cold air swept briefly into the house. My mother closed the door slowly, then turned toward me with devastation in her eyes. "What have you done?" she whispered. But her question didn't pierce me the way it once would have, because for the first time I could feel the ground shifting beneath my father's lies. For the first time, the silence that held our family together had split. And through that fracture, the truth was finally making its way in. I sat on the couch long after the officer's car disappeared down the street, feeling the silence around me twist into something sharp. My mother stood near the doorway, wringing her hands, her eyes darting back and forth like she was waiting for something to shatter. Maybe she already knew it had. Maybe she knew it the moment the officers stepped into our perfect suburban living room with their notepads and calm voices that cut cleaner than any blade. When she finally spoke, her voice came out small and broken. "Emily, I begged you," she whispered. "I begged you not to do this." Her words floated toward me like fragile ash. I wanted to pity her, but something inside me had hardened. "Mom, I didn't do anything. They came because of the evidence, because of the truth." She shook her head slowly like she was trying to shake off a nightmare. "Your father—" She stopped breathing for a moment. "Your father will be ruined. The community will talk. Our church, the business board, everyone will know." That last sentence told me everything. Her fear was never about me bleeding on the dining room floor. It was about the walls of reputation she had spent a lifetime holding in place. Before I could respond, the front door swung open and cold November air rushed in. My father stepped inside, carrying the remains of his authority, the way he carried his winter coat, heavy, purposeful, intimidating. His eyes locked on mine instantly, and I felt the instinctive jolt of fear pulse through me. The same pulse I had felt since childhood. The same one I felt the moment he lifted the chair. He didn't speak at first. He scanned my face the way someone scans a battlefield for weak spots. My mother rushed to him whispering the police came. They talked to her. They asked questions. His jaw tightened until I could hear his teeth grind. Then he turned fully toward me. "Get up," he said. His voice was low but carried a command I had obeyed my entire life. I stayed seated. Something about staying seated made my heart race but also made something inside me stand taller. His eyes widened with disbelief. "Get up now!" I shook my head. "No, I'm staying right here." Rage flickered through him like a match hitting gasoline. "You think you can ruin this family? You think you can lie and destroy everything I built?" I swallowed carefully. I didn't lie. The officers saw the EMS report. They saw the medical findings, and Uncle Bob told them what he saw. That landed like a slap. His face shifted as if I had spat poison at him. "Bob, that coward, that drunken fool. Your uncle always hated me, always jealous. He would say anything to turn you against us." The twist of desperation in his voice was something I had never seen before. It should have satisfied me, but it didn't. It only made me sad. Sad that this man could not see beyond himself enough to feel guilt. sad that destroying others was easier for him than acknowledging he had hurt his own daughter. My mother stepped between us, trying to calm the building storm. "Jim, please," she whispered. "Just breathe. Just talk this through. We can keep this quiet. No one has to know the details. We can say it was an accident." He glared at her. "This is your fault. You raised her to be weak, to be emotional. If she had stayed quiet, none of this would be happening." I stared at him, stunned, even though I should not have been. He had always blamed her for every problem, every inconvenience, every failure. Their marriage was built on silence and fear and duty, and now the cracks were visible from every angle. My mother trembled, tears welled in her eyes, but she did not argue, not even once. The front door opened again, and this time my Aunt Linda walked in with her 2 grown daughters trailing behind. Their faces were carved with worry and judgment. My aunt gasped the moment she saw me on the couch. "Emily, dear, what have you done?" I felt the exhaustion in my bones thicken. "What I have done," I said quietly. "What I have done is survive." She clucked her tongue like I was a child misbehaving in Sunday school. "You made a scene at Thanksgiving. Then you let the hospital involve the authorities. Now the whole family is talking. The girls' group chat is going wild. You embarrassed everyone." I let out a breathless laugh. It was bitter, sharp, almost frightening even to myself. She said embarrassed everyone as if I had spilled cranberry sauce on the rug instead of being beaten unconscious. My cousin Brittany stepped closer, her voice cutting. "Why couldn't you just let it go?" He apologized. My eyes snapped to her. He never apologized. He told everyone not to call 911. He lied to EMS. He lied to the doctors. And he would have kept lying if Uncle Bob hadn't said something. They all looked away, but none of them disagreed. My father's voice came low and venomous. "You will fix this. You will tell the police you slipped. You will call that officer and tell her you were confused. A concussion can do that. You will undo this mess." I remained still, my pulse steady now. "I will not lie." A dangerous silence fell over the room. My father's face darkened. My mother stepped back like she sensed the danger radiating off him. My aunt gasped, and then he moved. Not toward me, but toward the hallway toward the study. He grabbed the phone, dialed a number, spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is Jim Carter. You interviewed my daughter today. She is confused. She is not well, and her statements were incorrect. She wants to retract them." My blood went cold. He looked at me with triumph like he had just checkmated an opponent. The officer said something on the other end. His nostrils flared. Then he barked. "She is my daughter. I am her legal guardian. I speak for her." And then something inside me finally snapped. I stood up slowly, gripping the arm of the couch for balance. "You don't speak for me anymore." Everyone froze. My father lowered the phone, slightly stunned. Mom covered her mouth. My aunt stumbled back. I took another breath. Officer Lane asked me directly if someone hit me, and I told her the truth. I told her what happened. I told her what you did. Every voice in the room died. My father's eyes widened in disbelief, then twisted with something feral. "You ungrateful little traitor. I fed you. I clothed you. I paid for everything in your life. And this is how you repay me, by turning me into the police." I steadied myself. "You turned yourself into the police when you hit me with a chair." He lunged forward one step before my mother grabbed his arm. "Jim, stop! Please, stop!" But he yanked his arm away and sent her stumbling into the wall. That made everyone gasp. For a split second, I saw fear ripple through the room like electricity. Fear that had always existed but had never been spoken aloud. My father pointed at me, shaking with rage. "If you think the police will believe a hysterical girl over me, you are delusional. You are nothing without this family. Nothing." The words barely hit me, because suddenly the truth felt louder than his voice. I had the EMS report. I had the CT scans. I had the discharge summary. And I had Uncle Bob's witness statement. He wasn't the unchallengeable authority anymore. He was a man cornered by his own violence. A man about to face consequences he never expected. I swallowed and said quietly, "They already believe me." A knock hit the door, not hesitant, firm, purposeful. Everyone froze. My father's face drained of color. My mother whispered no, no, no under her breath. My aunt gripped her daughters. The knock came again. I stepped toward the entryway, trembling but determined. My father shouted, "Do not open that door!" But I did. 2 officers, including Officer Lane, stood on the porch. Behind them, another patrol car pulled up. Officer Lane spoke calmly. "Mr. Carter, we need you to step outside." My father's voice cracked with outrage. "On what grounds?" Officer Reynolds lifted a clipboard. "Based on the hospital report, the EMS documentation, and the sworn voluntary witness statement, we have probable cause." My father sputtered. His face mottled red. "You cannot do this." Officer Lane replied, "Yes, sir, we can." My mother began sobbing. My aunt gasped. My cousins stared in horror. And for the first time, I felt something warm rising in my chest. Something like justice. Something like breath. Something like freedom. My father was handcuffed on our front lawn while neighbors peeked from porches and curtains fluttered in windows. His voice boomed with anger and denial, but it no longer controlled anything around him. It was the sound of a collapsing empire. And as the patrol car door shut with a heavy echo, I felt my entire world shift irreversibly. Maybe I had ruined Thanksgiving as my family would claim, but I had saved myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth everything. The patrol car carrying my father disappeared down the street, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt like the entire neighborhood was holding its breath. My mother stood frozen in the doorway, her hands trembling near her mouth as if trying to push the reality back inside. My aunt clutched her daughters, whispering frantic prayers under her breath, while the November wind pushed leaves across the lawn like scattered remnants of a life suddenly fractured. I stepped back inside, feeling as if my legs did not belong to me anymore. My heart thudded with a mixture of terror and relief because the truth was I had no idea what would happen next. All I knew was that everything had finally stopped being pretend. 10 minutes after the officers left, my mother turned on me with a grief-stricken fury that made her look older, smaller, worn down by decades of silence. "Emily, what have you done?" she cried, her voice cracking. "Do you understand what this will do to our family? To our name? To everything your father built?" Her words hit me like stones, but they no longer knocked the breath from me. I felt something new inside me, a foundation forming. "Mom," I said quietly, "Dad did this, not me. You think the church will forgive this?" she shouted. "You think the board at the credit union will keep him on? His friends, his colleagues, everyone will know." I nodded slowly because for the first time in my life, I was not going to deny the truth to comfort her. "Yes, they will know, and they should." She stumbled back, pressing her hand to the wall as if she needed something to hold her up. My Aunt Linda approached her, whispering loudly enough for me to hear, "Maybe she will change her story. Maybe she is just overwhelmed. She has always been dramatic." My cousins nodded, huddled together like a jury already convinced I was the villain. I stared at them, feeling a hollow ache in my chest, not because they doubted me, but because I had spent years trying to earn love from people who only cared about the version of me that stayed silent. I turned away and headed upstairs to my childhood room, wanting to curl into something soft, wanting to breathe without being watched. But halfway up the stairs, my Uncle Bob stepped inside the house. His expression was haunted. His eyes red-rimmed, not from alcohol this time, but from carrying the weight of truth too long. When he saw me, he didn't hesitate. He pulled me into a tight, shaky hug. "I am so sorry, kiddo," he whispered into my hair. "I should have told the truth sooner. I should have protected you when you were little." His voice cracked. I should have walked out of that house years ago. I held on to him, letting the tears fall silently, because unlike the others, he wasn't trying to change my story or erase it. He was stepping into it with me. When he pulled back, he gripped my shoulders. "This is not your fault, Emily. I saw what happened, and I will keep telling them exactly what I saw. Even if your mother threatens to cut me out. Even if your aunt tells the whole town I am lying, I will not back down." Something inside me steadied. "Thank you," I whispered. Those 2 words broke something in him. He wiped his face roughly, then turned to the others. "You all should be ashamed of yourselves," he said, his voice rising. "I watched him hit her. I watched him pick up a chair and swing it. And I watched every single one of you freeze instead of helping her." My aunt gasped as if offended by the truth spoken out loud. "Jim would never," he began, but Bob cut her off sharply. "He did. And you all know he did. You just don't want anyone else to know." The room pulsed with tension. My mother lowered her head. My cousins looked away. And in that moment, the loyalty lines that had held our family together began to dissolve. That night, I didn't sleep. My mind drifted through childhood memories that suddenly looked different under the harsh light of truth. The slammed doors, the broken dishes. My mother's whispered, "He's under stress." My father's apologies that sounded more like commands, "Do not push me again." I replayed the chair swinging through the air, the Thanksgiving table freezing, the sound of his voice telling everyone not to call 911, and I realized something terrifying. I could have died. Not metaphorically, not emotionally. My life could have ended on that dining room floor while relatives watched in stunned silence. The next morning, Officer Lane called. "Emily, I want to keep you updated," she said gently. "Your father is being held overnight. He will be arraigned tomorrow morning. You may be asked to provide another statement as the investigation progresses." I agreed, feeling fear and determination twist together like double-edged threads. After the call, I packed a small bag. A few clothes, my journal, my medication, the photo of me at age 7 in a blue dress, the only picture from childhood where I looked genuinely happy. As I headed downstairs, my mother intercepted me. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice frayed. I looked her in the eyes. "Somewhere safe." She flinched. "Emily, this is your home." I shook my head. "Not anymore." A long breath shook out of her. "You are choosing strangers over family," she whispered. "No," I said. "I am choosing myself." She covered her face as if my words were too blinding to look at. I walked past her and my aunt's disapproval, my cousin's stares, the weight of histories pressing down on the old wallpaper, and stepped outside into cold Ohio air. My Uncle Bob was in his truck waiting. I climbed in and he nodded without speaking. He took me to a small motel 20 minutes away, not fancy, not glamorous, but safe enough. For the first time in days, I slept deeply, dreamlessly, without hearing footsteps, without fearing a door might swing open, without bracing for someone's anger. The following week became a blur of court dates, phone calls, officer check-ins, and more medical appointments than I could count. The concussion symptoms persisted, headaches, dizziness, waves of nausea that made me grip the bathroom sink until they passed. My therapist, who had treated me for anxiety months earlier without knowing the real cause, worked tirelessly to help me process the trauma that had shattered open. "You are not crazy," she said after I described the gaslighting. "You are conditioned." Conditioning is powerful, but not permanent. Meanwhile, the town learned quickly what had happened. In suburban communities, news spreads faster than wind. Some neighbors avoided eye contact at the grocery store. Others offered soft, supportive nods. A few women from church sent me messages quietly admitting they had seen bruises on my mother before. One wrote, "Your courage might save someone else someday." That message stayed with me, but not everyone was supportive. My Aunt Linda spread her own version of events, claiming I was making everything up to punish my father for being strict. Her daughters posted cryptic messages online about family betrayal. A few distant cousins wrote that I had broken the Carter family legacy, but with each accusation, the truth felt stronger, because now there were official documents behind it. The criminal complaint, the EMS report, the CT scan images, my medical records. And the most powerful piece, my Uncle Bob's sworn statement, which he repeated in front of officers a second time the following week, refusing to waver even when my aunt threatened to cut ties with him forever. When the arraignment came, I sat in the back of the courtroom, my hoodie pulled low, my hands shaking in my lap. My father entered in handcuffs, wearing the same prideful posture, but his eyes darted toward me with a mix of fury and panic. He pleaded not guilty. His lawyer argued that I had slipped, that I was confused, that I had a history of emotional instability. But as the prosecutor listed the evidence one by one, my father's expression faltered. The EMS note describing the scene as inconsistent with a fall. The laceration pattern, the concussion location, the fact that my uncle had seen him lift the chair, the fact that he had ordered witnesses to stay quiet. The judge denied bail. My father was taken back into custody. My mother collapsed onto a bench afterward, sobbing quietly. I sat beside her for a long time, neither of us speaking, because there were no words left that could mend the pieces between us. Over the next month, the consequences rippled through every part of our lives. My father was removed from the credit union board. His church leadership position was suspended. His closest friends distanced themselves. My mother faced questioning from protective services about her role in covering up the assault. She miscarried the trust of neighbors she had spent years trying to impress. She called me twice, begging me to reconsider my statements to soften the truth, but I didn't answer either message. I could not walk backward into that fire again. As winter deepened, I found a small apartment near the edge of town. My uncle helped me move my things, carrying boxes with quiet determination. When we finished, he stood in the doorway, looking apologetic. "I should have stepped in sooner," he said again. I shook my head. "You stepped in now. That matters." And it did. Because healing never comes from perfection. It comes from courage. My father eventually accepted a plea agreement, felony assault, witness intimidation, a mandatory counseling and anger management program, and jail time. The day he was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom again with my uncle beside me. My father never turned around to look at me. Maybe he couldn't, or maybe he wouldn't give me the satisfaction. But when the judge read the sentence, I felt my lungs expand as if I had been underwater for years and had finally surfaced. Abuse thrives in darkness, but light blinds it, and the truth was finally blazing. My mother left the courthouse without a word. I watched her walk away, shoulders slumped, coat wrapped tight around her as if bracing against a storm she still refused to name. I did not chase her. I could not save her from a silence she chose. That night in my new apartment, with boxes still scattered and the heating clicking loudly through old vents, I sat on the floor with a blanket around my shoulders. I felt grief and relief and guilt and freedom all at once. Healing is not a straight line. It is a heartbeat rising and falling, reminding you that you are still alive. I whispered to myself, I made it out. And for the first time, the words felt real. The first morning in my new apartment felt strangely hollow and strangely peaceful at the same time. I woke to the hum of an old radiator and a thin strip of winter light cutting through the blinds dust, drifting in it like tiny ghosts of all the years I had spent in a house that never felt like mine. My body still ached from the concussion, and my heart still felt bruised in places I was only beginning to understand. But for the first time in my life, the air around me did not vibrate with dread. No footsteps, no slammed doors, no forced smiles, no pretending, just quiet, just. At first, that quiet terrified me because silence had always been the space danger used to creep into. But slowly I realized this silence was different. This silence was mine. I slid out of bed carefully and sat on the edge for several minutes, grounding myself as my therapist had taught me. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel your breath. Feel the safety. It felt strange to practice safety like it was a skill, but that was exactly what I was doing. Survival had been instinctual. Healing would take discipline. In the tiny kitchen, I made coffee in a thrifted pot that sputtered and hissed, but worked just well enough. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and looked out the window at the empty parking lot. For years, my mornings had started with my father's voice booming commands about chores or responsibilities or my supposed failures. Now the only voice that greeted me was my own, and I barely recognized it. That week, I focused only on the essentials: rest, food, even if simple, medication taken on time, short walks outside when the dizziness eased, hours in therapy unpacking memories I had locked away for decades. My therapist kept reminding me something that felt radical. You are allowed to grieve the family you hoped you had, not the one you actually had. Those words hit me like a gentle hammer breaking open something I had always kept sealed. I grieved in waves. Grieved the child who learned to make herself quiet. Grieved the teenager who thought anger from a parent was her fault. Grieved the young woman who believed love meant enduring anything. Grieved the mother I wished my mom had been the one who chose silence over me. At night, I sometimes cried until my pillow grew cold. Other nights, I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, feeling nothing at all. Healing is not warm. Healing is raw. But slowly, the pieces of me that had been scattered began drifting back toward each other. One afternoon in early December, my mother called. I stared at the screen for a long moment before letting it go to voicemail. Her message trembled. "Emily, please call me back. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm losing everything." When I replayed her message later that night, there was a sharp twist inside me because part of me wanted to comfort her the way I had done since childhood. But another part of me, the part learning boundaries, whispered softly, "It is not your job to hold her together if she will not hold herself accountable." I did not call her back. That was a boundary, and it was a beginning. A few days later, my uncle visited bringing takeout and a toolbox to help install curtain rods that I could have struggled through on my own, but he insisted on doing. He looked around the apartment with a soft smile. "It feels safe in here," he said, "like a place where the truth can breathe." I blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you for staying," he added quietly. "Most people run from truth. You walked right into it." I shook my head. "I didn't walk into it. I fell into it." He laughed gently. "Maybe. But you stood up afterward. That's what matters." His faith in me healed something my family had broken. By mid-December, I began journaling each night, writing about memories that resurfaced and moments that startled me, like when someone dropped a pan in the apartment above and my whole body flinched as if a chair were swinging toward me again. My therapist helped me identify triggers, understand them, and slowly loosen the grip they had on me. She explained that trauma rewires the brain, but it can be rewired again with patience and compassion. Compassion was harder for me than truth. Compassion for myself felt like wearing a sweater that didn't quite fit yet. But I practiced. I practiced saying no. I practiced resting without guilt. I practiced not apologizing for breathing. I practiced eating at the pace my body needed, not rushing out of habit. Around Christmas, my mother sent a card, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "I wish things could go back to how they were." I froze reading that sentence because it told me she still did not understand. How they were was the entire problem. She apologized in the next paragraph, but it was an apology wrapped in excuses. "Your father was under stress. I never meant for you to feel unsafe. Families go through difficult times." None of it acknowledged the truth. None of it acknowledged the violence. None of it acknowledged her silence. I placed the card back in the envelope and slid it into a drawer, not out of spite, but out of preservation. That was another boundary. In January, I started part-time remote work for a small nonprofit that helped survivors of domestic violence access resources. A friend of my therapist had recommended me, and at first I felt completely unqualified. But reading intake forms and hearing stories that mirrored my own reminded me that speaking my truth had not just been personal. It had been a kind of rebellion against generational patterns. It had been a refusal to pass this legacy forward. My supervisor, a gentlewoman named Claudia, told me something during my first week that I wrote on a sticky note and put above my desk. "Healing is not a return to who you were. It is the arrival of who you were always meant to be." I read that sentence every day. I felt it slowly becoming true. In February, the prosecutor called to update me on the timeline for the trial. My father's plea agreement meant he would avoid the spectacle of a full trial, but sentencing would occur soon. My presence was optional but encouraged. I said I would be there, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted closure. Closure is not a door slammed in someone else's face. Closure is a door opened for yourself. On the morning of sentencing, snow fell in slow, quiet flakes, coating everything in white hush. My uncle picked me up wearing a suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders, but he looked dignified anyway. Proud. When we arrived at the courthouse, my breath fogged the air and my hands shook slightly, but I walked inside anyway. I sat in the same row as before. My father entered in the same posture, chin high, eyes cold, but his shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen. He did not look at me, not even once. When the judge read the sentencing recommendation, the courtroom air tightened, then loosened again as the reality settled. Custodial time, mandatory counseling, no contact order, restrictions on firearms, a record that would follow him into every job application and background check from now on. Consequences. Real ones. As he was led away, I felt a rush of emotions. Grief, anger, relief, sadness, exhaustion, but beneath them all, something quieter, something steady, something like peace. Not a peace washed clean of pain, but a peace carved out from surviving it. That night, I returned to my apartment, lit a single candle, and cooked my own small meal. I sat at the table, a table I bought myself with a chair no one would ever raise against me. As I ate, I listened to the soft hum of the heater and the distant sounds of life outside. Ordinary noises, safe noises, ones that no longer made me jump. I realized something profound in that moment. Healing was not loud. Healing was not a triumphant shout. Healing was the quiet knowing that I had chosen myself, that I had built a boundary and stood by it, that I had stopped a cycle that had defined generations. I whispered into the stillness, "I am free." And for the first time, the words felt like they belonged to me. The spring thaw arrived slowly that year, as if the world itself was hesitant to wake up after such a long winter. Snow melted into slush, then into clear patches of earth, then into small green shoots pushing stubbornly through the cold soil. I watched it happen from the balcony of my apartment, sipping coffee in the early mornings, feeling the air shift from brittle to tender. Something inside me was thawing too, though not as quickly, not as cleanly. Healing was not a sunrise, it was a flicker, a pause, a breath recalibrating. Each day, I learned something new about what it meant to live a life that belonged to me. Some mornings, I woke with a surprising sense of excitement for the day ahead. Other mornings, grief sat heavy on my chest, reminding me that my family, as I had once known it, was gone forever. But even that grief felt like a necessary truth, rather than the suffocating silence I had grown up in. The sentencing had closed one chapter, but the aftermath was its own landscape to navigate. My father's no-contact order meant he could not call Wright or send messages through anyone else. It was a boundary enforced by law, a concept that still felt surreal. My mother obeyed the order out of fear more than respect, often leaving short voicemails that never asked how I was, but always hinted at how hard things were for her. I listened, but rarely responded. Each message reminded me that boundaries can exist and still ache. In March, my therapist encouraged me to write a letter to my younger self. I resisted at first, thinking it sounded cliché or childish. But one rainy afternoon, I finally sat down on my couch, opened my journal, and tried. What came out surprised me. I wrote to the little girl who had learned to move through hallways like a whisper to avoid waking the dragon. I wrote to the teenager who flinched when someone raised their voice, even in laughter. I wrote to the young woman who believed she deserved the anger she received. I wrote to her with gentleness I had never shown myself before. When I finished, I felt raw and exposed, but also strangely calm. Compassion was beginning to feel less like a sweater that didn't fit and more like one I was learning to grow into. Around that time, I returned to part-time work with the domestic violence nonprofit. My role expanded as I learned more. I began helping with intake assessments, advocating for survivors navigating the same systems I had once feared. People trusted me because I spoke their language, the language of someone who had lived the silence and lived beyond it. One woman named Marisol said quietly during a call, "You get it. You actually get it." Her trust felt like a gift and a responsibility. Not every day was heavy, though. Some evenings I cooked new recipes, experimenting like a kid left alone in a kitchen for the first time. Some afternoons I took long walks discovering neighborhoods I had never noticed before because I had been too consumed by surviving. I began building a life brick by brick, moment by moment, one that did not revolve around fear. In April, I received a quiet, unexpected message from my Aunt Linda. It was short. "I am sorry for what I said. I did not understand." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the subtle shift in her tone. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't defending her behavior. It was an acknowledgement. I didn't write back. Sometimes closure isn't a conversation. Sometimes it's the space you allow between what was and what will never be again. But the message loosened something inside me. If even she could recognize her blindness, then perhaps humanity was not as fixed as I once feared. A week later, my mother appeared unannounced outside my apartment. I saw her through the peephole before opening the door, hesitating. She looked small in her beige coat, her hair pulled back in a way that reminded me of childhood mornings when she tried to look put together before my father woke up. When I opened the door, she gave a fragile smile. "Hi, honey," she whispered. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, but only far enough for her to enter the threshold, not the living room. A physical reminder of the boundary I still needed. She nodded as if understanding. Her eyes glistened. "I never meant for you to think I didn't care," she began. I didn't know how to stand up to him. I didn't know how to protect you. The apology was imperfect, but it was real in a way her previous messages hadn't been. A part of me wanted to collapse into her arms, and a part of me wanted to close the door forever. Instead, I said evenly, "I believe you loved me. I just needed you to act like it." She winced. Tears filled her eyes. "I wish I had been stronger." I nodded. "I know, but wishing isn't the same as changing." She looked at me for a long moment as if waiting for permission to continue living her life. Then she whispered, "I want to do better, if you'll let me." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. The girl I used to be would have said yes instantly, but the woman I was becoming asked a different question. "Are you in therapy?" She blinked, surprised, then shook her head. "Not yet." I nodded again. "Start there. Then maybe we can talk again." Her eyes softened with something like acceptance. She touched her hand to her heart, then stepped back. "I love you," she whispered. I didn't say it back, not because I didn't feel something for her, but because the words had weight now. Words had to match action. After she left, I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing out slowly. That was another kind of closure, not a door slam, but a controlled opening. Later that month, I received a letter from the court informing me that my father had enrolled in a mandatory anger management program. He had attempted to appeal the no-contact order and been denied. A part of me wondered what he felt in that cell, whether he believed he was the victim or whether he finally saw the truth in the cracks of his life. But I didn't linger on the thought. His healing, if he sought it, was not my responsibility. My responsibility was rebuilding myself, building a future that did not carry his shadow. As May arrived with warm breezes and blooming trees, I decided to host my own version of a holiday gathering. A small one. Gentle. Just a dinner with my uncle and a few friends I had made at work. I cooked roasted vegetables and chicken infused with lemon and thyme, filling my apartment with scents that reminded me of home, but without the tension that once accompanied it. When we sat around the table eating, laughing, telling stories, I felt something settle inside me. This is what family feels like, I thought. Not blood, not obligation. Chosen trust. Soft presence. Respect. After everyone left, I washed dishes, slowly savoring the warm water and the quiet. When I finished, I stepped out onto my balcony again. The air smelled faintly of rain and lilacs. Across town somewhere, my mother was likely sitting alone, trying to understand how to rebuild without the rules she had lived by for decades. My father was in a cell with cinder block walls, perhaps replaying a lifetime of choices. And I stood on my balcony feeling both the ache and the freedom of stepping into a future entirely my own. As the night deepened, I whispered something into the air, not to anyone else but to myself. I didn't break the family. I told the truth they built it on, and the truth even when it hurts is the beginning of every kind of freedom. I closed my eyes, breathing in the quiet. For the first time, it felt like closure, not an ending, not an erasure, but a beginning shaped by truth, by boundaries, by strength I never knew I had until the moment I stood up from the floor where the chair had knocked me down. I opened my eyes to the dark, calm sky and felt peace settle across my shoulders like a soft, finally fitting coat. Healing had not just arrived. Healing had chosen to stay. If you are still here at the end of this story, then maybe something in Emily's journey touched a place in you that you do not talk about often. Maybe a bruise you learned to hide, or a silence you were taught to keep, or a truth you were told would break your family if you ever dared to speak it. But here is what her story asks you gently and powerfully at the same time. Was it really the truth that broke the family, or was it the lies that held it together for so long that finally cracked under their own weight? For so many people, especially in small American towns where reputation is currency and family loyalty is preached louder than safety, the idea of speaking up feels like betrayal. Yet Emily's journey shows something different. She didn't betray her family. She refused to betray herself. And maybe that is the most difficult decision any of us can make, especially when we are raised to believe endurance is love and silence is respect and forgiveness must come before accountability. But none of those things are real without boundaries. Boundaries are not walls that punish. They are doors that protect. They are the moment you decide your life is worth more than someone else's comfort. And for anyone watching, reading, or listening who has ever felt trapped in a cycle of keeping the peace at the expense of your own truth, I want to tell you something clearly. You deserve safety. You deserve to be believed. You deserve a life where fear is not the background noise. And you are not alone. Maybe your healing will not look like Emily's. Maybe it will be quieter or slower or messier or full of stops and starts. That is okay. Healing is still healing even when it shakes. Even when it aches, even when you do it trembling. If this story resonated with you in any way, let it serve as a reminder that courage rarely looks heroic. Sometimes courage is dialing 911 even when someone tells you not to. Sometimes courage is sitting in a courtroom facing the person who hurt you. Sometimes courage is walking out the door with only a small bag and your name. And sometimes courage is simply whispering the truth out loud for the first time. If you have ever survived something similar, or if you are still surviving now, your voice matters here. Share your thoughts. Share your story if you feel safe. Share what part of Emily's journey stayed with you. And if you want more stories that honor truth, healing, justice, and the boundaries that protect us, hit subscribe. Stay with us and let this community be a reminder that you never have to walk through darkness alone. Where are you listening from tonight?